After discovering her husband's betrayal, Grace abandoned a home filled with lies and bitterness. She moved to a small town in the countryside, but what she discovered there turned her world upside down. The clock on the wall of the operating room ticked past 7 in the evening, a time when Seattle buzzes with its eclectic mix of tech hustle and waterfront calm. For Grace Thompson, though, that sound marked the start of another 12-hour shift, a precise dance of scalpels, monitors, and hearts in need of a second chance. As one of the most respected cardiovascular surgeons at the hospital, the routine was her anchor, a predictable shield against life's uncertainties. But on that Tuesday, fate decided to shuffle the deck. Dr. Harris, an older colleague with weary eyes and a warm, fatherly smile, approached her in the sterile corridor. "Grace, my grandson's admitted here with a high fever. Would you mind swapping this night shift for my slot another day?" A wave of unexpected relief washed over Grace. A free evening, a whole night without the relentless beeping of machines or the weight of a life in her hands. Her thoughts immediately turned to her husband, Charles, and their 8-year-old son, Noah. Charles was likely working late at his investment firm, as usual. Noah would probably be asleep, his dark curls splayed across the pillow. "Of course, Harris, take the shift, no problem. Give your grandson a hug for me and wish him well," she replied, her empathy genuine. As she traded her scrubs for everyday clothes, a spark of spontaneity flickered in her carefully structured life. Surprised Charles. Their routine, while safe, had become a thick fog between them. Conversations revolved around bills, Noah's school, and weekly logistics. Romance had become a luxury, reserved for anniversaries or special occasions. Tonight was a golden opportunity. On her way home, she stopped at a chic artisanal shop. She picked out a bottle of Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon, bold and complex, Charles's favorite. Beside it, a box of dark chocolate truffles with sea salt, her own indulgence. She pictured the scene. She'd slip in quietly, light some candles, and they could talk, laugh, maybe even rediscover the couple they were before responsibilities buried them. A quiet smile curved her lips. It was a simple plan, but it carried a hope she hadn't felt in ages. The doorman of their downtown building, Mr. Jenkins, greeted her with his usual nod. "Evening, Dr. Grace. Home early tonight?" "An unexpected break, Mr. Jenkins." "A lucky night," she said, the word lucky soon to carry a bitter irony. Turning the key in the lock of their 15th-floor condo, Grace was met by an odd stillness. Not the empty quiet of an unoccupied home, but a tense hush, like the air before a storm. The living room lights were off, save for a single lamp casting a golden glow over the leather armchair. Charles's briefcase lay tossed on the couch, a sign he was already home. Noah, she assumed, was either playing or fast asleep in his room. She set her bag and purchases on the granite kitchen counter, slipping off her shoes to keep the surprise perfect. Then she heard it. Not loud, but clear enough to slice through the silence. A voice, a woman's voice, distinctly not hers, coming from the hallway leading to the bedrooms. Her heart, which she spent her days mending in others, gave a single, painful thud against her ribs. The air grew thin. Every instinct honed as a surgeon, trained to analyze, diagnose, and act under pressure, snapped to attention. She moved down the hallway, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. Noah's door was slightly ajar. A quick glance confirmed he was sleeping soundly, oblivious to the drama unfolding nearby. The voice came again, louder now, from the master bedroom. It was intimate, conspiratorial. It was followed by Charles's deep voice, a murmur she couldn't make out but recognized instantly, a tone he hadn't used with her in years. Her blood turned to ice. She stopped before the door, her hand hovering over the cold metal knob. Part of her wanted to flee, to rewind time, take the shift, and live in safe ignorance, but the woman who faced death daily couldn't retreat from the truth, no matter how devastating. With a steady hand, she turned the knob and pushed the door open. The sight that greeted her was a grotesque tableau, a vivid portrait of betrayal. The bedside lamp cast light on 2 figures. Charles, her husband of 12 years, the man with whom she'd built a life, sat on the edge of the bed, shirtless. Standing with her back to the door was a woman wearing Grace's silk robe. Not just any robe, but the one Charles had given her for her last birthday, a deep emerald green that he said matched her eyes. The woman turned at the sound of the door. It was Emily, Charles's personal assistant. Young, with a smile that now seemed predatory, her body draped in Grace's robe as if it were made for her. The shock on Emily's face quickly morphed into a silent challenge. Charles leapt up, panic flooding his eyes. "Grace, what are you doing here? Weren't you on call?" The question was so absurd, so pathetic that Grace almost laughed. Adrenaline surged, sharpening her senses, clearing her mind. The pain would come later. Now was the time for surgical precision. She stepped into the room, her gaze locking first on Charles, then on Emily, who stood frozen, a statue of audacity wrapped in her stolen silk. "Take it off," Grace said, her voice low but sharp as a scalpel. Emily frowned. "What?" "Take it off. Now." Each word was a command, devoid of hysteria, but heavy with unyielding authority. Emily glanced at Charles for support, but he was paralyzed, unable to form a coherent sentence. "Grace, I can explain—" "There's nothing to explain, Charles. There's only what I see." She cut him off, her eyes never leaving Emily. "I said, take it off." With trembling hands, Emily untied the robe. The silk slid off her shoulders, pooling on the floor in a green puddle. She stood there, exposed and diminished, her arrogance evaporating under Grace's icy stare. Grace turned to Charles. The man she'd loved, the father of her son, was a stranger, a coward. The humiliation burned in her chest, a raw, festering wound. The image of her robe on another woman in their bedroom, on their bed, would be a scar she'd carry forever. "I want you both out of my house. How could you do this with our son in the next room?" she said, her voice still controlled but vibrating with suppressed fury. "Get your things. I'm going to Noah's room. You have 10 minutes. If either of you is still here when I return, I'm calling the police." "Grace, please, let's talk." Charles tried, stepping toward her. "Don't you dare come near me," she hissed, raw emotion breaking through for the first time. "Just leave." She turned, not looking back, and walked to Noah's room, closing the door softly to avoid waking him. She sat in the small armchair by his bed, the only safe harbor in the wreckage of her life. She heard muffled sounds, clothes being packed, hurried, angry whispers. The front door slammed, not as a period, but as the starting gun for a race Grace didn't yet know she was running. She stayed still, her body rigid, her mind a whirlwind of fragmented images, the green silk on the floor, Charles's panicked eyes, Emily's defiant smile. Each detail was a shard of glass in her memory. The air she breathed felt tainted, every object in the condo a reminder of betrayal. Staying was impossible. With the same precision she applied to a complex surgery, she began to act. She grabbed Noah's backpack and packed essentials, pajamas, toothbrush, his favorite stuffed bear, a change of clothes. For herself, just her purse, phone, and car keys. She didn't glance at the master bedroom, refusing to let the pain of loss take hold. In that moment, she wasn't a betrayed wife. She was a mother in protection mode. With Noah asleep in her arms, a warm, familiar weight against her chest, she left the condo without looking back, locking the door on a life that had just collapsed. The only name that came to mind was Sarah. Sarah, her friend since medical school, Noah's godmother, her anchor in every storm. It was nearly 2 in the morning when Grace buzzed the intercom of Sarah's building across town. Sarah's sleepy voice was a balm. "Grace, is something wrong?" "Everything's wrong, Sarah." "Can I come up?" The question was a formality. Sarah was waiting at the door, already in sweatpants, her face etched with concern. She didn't ask questions. She just looked at Grace's pale face, at Noah sleeping in her arms, and opened her arms. In that tight, silent embrace, Grace allowed the first crack to appear in her armor. She didn't cry, but an uncontrollable tremor ran through her. "Come in. Put him in the guest room," Sarah said softly, leading her inside. After settling Noah in bed, tucking him under a soft comforter, Grace returned to the living room. Sarah was waiting with 2 mugs of chamomile tea, steam curling upward. They sat on the couch, Seattle's skyline dim outside the window. "Charles," Grace said, the name bitter on her tongue. "With his assistant. In our bed." Sarah let out a low, furious curse. She took Grace's hand, her cold fingers finding warmth in her friend's. There were no empty platitudes, no clichés. Just the solid presence of someone who knew sometimes silence is the only answer. They stayed awake as the night dragged on, the tea growing cold. Grace couldn't close her eyes. Each attempt brought the image of the green robe on the floor, burned into her eyelids. The future, once a paved road, medical conferences, Noah's graduation, planned vacations, now loomed as a chasm. The condo, the marriage, their social circle, all crumbled to dust. But amid the ruins, one certainty grew stronger by the minute. She couldn't stay in Seattle. The city, once a symbol of her achievements, now felt like a gilded cage. Every corner, every coffee shop, every park would be haunted by memories of a happiness revealed as a lie. And Noah, how could she raise him in an environment of arguments, accusations, and a drawn-out divorce? She didn't want her son growing up in that toxicity, learning about love from a broken marriage. "I'm leaving, Sarah," she said suddenly, her voice steady, surprising herself. Sarah looked at her, searching for any hint of doubt. "Leaving for where, Grace?" "I don't know. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere Noah can climb trees and get dirt on his shoes. Where the air is clean and people wave at each other on the street. Somewhere we can start over, just the two of us. I can't face this here. Too many memories, too much pain." The idea, born as an impulse to flee, began to take shape as a survival plan. Sarah, ever practical, stood and returned with her laptop. "If you're serious, let's see what's out there." As dawn's first light painted the sky grey, they started their search. Rural properties, farmhouses for sale, cabins in the countryside. The keywords opened a portal to a world far from Seattle's urban sprawl. They scrolled through listings of modern ranches with infinity pools, gated community homes with 24-hour security. None felt right. They were just smaller, greener versions of the life she was leaving behind. Then a modest listing caught her eye, almost buried among the others. No professional photos, just simple shots likely taken with a phone. "Old Cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains," read the title. The images showed a house with a wide porch, weathered wooden beams, and faded red shutters. There was an orchard with ancient trees, a patchy lawn, and in the background, the rugged outline of mountains. The description was brief. Property with great potential, needs TLC. Reason for sale, health. The price was surprisingly affordable, almost too good to be true. It was a fraction of the condo's value. To Grace, it wasn't a red flag, but an opportunity. She wasn't seeking perfection. She was seeking refuge, a place to rebuild. The cabin seemed to have a soul, a history. The peeling paint and aged wood didn't deter her. They felt inviting, as if the house bore its own scars. "That's the one," Grace whispered, pointing at the screen. Sarah leaned closer, skeptical. "Grace, that's in the middle of nowhere. The place looks like it might collapse, and health reasons could mean trouble." "That's exactly why I want it," Grace replied, conviction growing. "I don't need luxury, Sarah. I need peace. A place where I can heal, forget everything, and where Noah can be a kid, truly a kid." She looked at the phone number in the listing. It was a landline, rare these days. A surge of urgency hit her. This wasn't just a house, it was a beacon in her dark night. The image of that porch, with the promise of quiet mornings and the sound of wind in the trees, overpowered the memory of the defiled bedroom. She grabbed her phone, her heart pounding with fear and excitement. She would call. She would find out who was on the other end of that line, and perhaps on the other side of her new life. Her finger hovered over the phone screen, hesitating for just a second. It was the fear of the unknown battling her desperate need to escape the familiar. The need won. She took a deep breath and dialed, the ringing echoing in the silence of Sarah's apartment. After several long, drawn-out rings, a voice answered. It was male, frail and slightly raspy, like dry leaves skittering in the wind. "Hello?" "Good morning," Grace said. "I'm calling about the listing for a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Is the property still available?" There was a pause, followed by a dry, rattling cough. "Yes, ma'am, it's still for sale. My name's Edward Wilson, I'm the owner." "I'm Grace Thompson. I saw the photos and I'm very interested." Could you tell me more about the place, if you don't mind? Edward's voice warmed, the fragility giving way to a tone of nostalgic pride. He described the cabin not like a realtor, but like a keeper of memories. Grace listened, captivated. He didn't talk square footage or property values. He spoke of the place's soul, the creak of the porch swing, the way the morning mist clung to the orchard, the sound of the nearby creek after a rain. Yet there was a melancholy undercurrent, a note of farewell in every word. Mr. Wilson, the listing mentions health as the reason for selling. Is everything okay? Grace asked, the doctor in her unable to ignore the detail. The line went quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, heavy with calm resignation. Let's just say my time's running short, dear. The doctors gave me a diagnosis with not much hope. It's advanced. Grace's chest tightened. It was a story she knew too well, but hearing it from a patient outside the sterile hospital walls carried a different weight. I'm so sorry, Mr. Wilson, she said sincerely. Don't be. We all have our time, he replied, without a trace of self-pity. That's why I'm selling. No heirs, my wife passed years ago. I don't want this place, which meant everything to me, to fall to ruin or into the hands of folks just looking to flip it. I need the money to settle my affairs, but I have one condition. What's that? Grace asked, her curiosity piqued. I'd like to sell the property but stay here, in the little guest house out back. Until the end. I wouldn't be in the way. I just want to pass looking at my trees. The proposal was unusual, almost absurd for a typical buyer. Sarah, listening nearby, shook her head, eyes wide. But to Grace, it didn't feel like a problem. It felt like a pact. This man wasn't just selling a property, he was seeking someone to carry his legacy. And she wasn't just buying a house, she was searching for a sanctuary. His condition made it all feel more real, more human. I understand, Grace said, to Sarah's shock. Mr. Wilson, I'd love to meet you and see the cabin. I have an 8-year-old son, Noah. Could we come by this weekend? A note of genuine surprise and joy lit up Edward's voice. Why, I'd be honored. I'll leave the gate open for you. That Saturday morning, Grace buckled Noah into the car. She hadn't shared the details of the betrayal, only that they needed a break from Seattle and were visiting a special new place. The nearly 3-hour drive was a transition. Skyscrapers gave way to rolling hills, the city's heavy air replaced by a crisp breeze through the open windows. Noah, grumpy and glued to his tablet at first, soon forgot it, mesmerized by the landscape, the grazing cows, and the small towns they passed. Following Edward's directions, they turned off the main highway onto a dirt road lined with towering pines. Then they saw it. The cabin was just as it appeared in the photos, but infinitely more enchanting. The house, with its chipped paint and red shutters, seemed alive, breathing in harmony with the surrounding nature. The wooden gate, as promised, stood open. An elderly man, thin with snow-white hair, stood on the porch, leaning on a cane. He wore denim overalls and a simple flannel shirt. His face was a map of kind wrinkles, his eyes, though tired, sparkling with a warm intelligence. This was Edward Wilson. As Grace parked, he descended the porch steps with careful slowness, coming to meet them with a smile that brightened his face. "Welcome," he said, his voice matching the phone call. "You must be Grace, and this fine young man must be Noah." Noah, usually shy with strangers, looked at Edward and, instead of hiding behind his mother, offered a small smile. "Hi," Grace said, shaking the hand he extended. His grip was bony, the skin thin but firm. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mr. Wilson. This place, it's even more beautiful in person." "It's the details that make it special," Edward said, winking at Noah. "Want to see the oldest apple tree in these mountains, kid?" Noah's eyes widened. "Does it have apples?" "The sweetest ones," Edward chuckled, his laugh turning into a brief cough. As Edward led Noah through the orchard, pointing out trees and sharing their secrets, Grace watched from the porch. She saw her son, the city kid afraid of bugs, touch a tree's bark with awe and laugh freely as Edward told a story about a crow that stole cherries. A peace she hadn't felt in years settled in her heart. The visit was more than a property tour. It was a meeting of souls. They shared coffee and pie in the old kitchen, talking about life, loss, and the meaning of home. Edward spoke of his late wife, Clara, with a love untouched by time. Grace, sparing the sordid details, shared her need for a fresh start, a safe haven for her son. In that setting, surrounded by nature's honesty and Edward's calm, Grace's decision solidified. It wasn't a logical choice driven by spreadsheets or market analysis. It was a choice of the heart. This place, with its kind owner and tangible history, was the only place she could see herself rebuilding. The connection was immediate, profound, undeniable. She wasn't just buying a cabin, she was being welcomed by it. She made her decision. The move from Seattle to the small town in the Blue Ridge Mountains was less a relocation and more a replanting. Grace felt as if she'd been uprooted from barren soil and set in fertile ground. She left the luxury condo and her hospital job, chasing simplicity. The sales paperwork moved quickly, smoothed by the lack of greed on both sides. Grace used part of her savings to buy the cabin, and the agreement with Edward was sealed with a handshake on the porch, a gesture more binding than any contract. The first days were a symphony of newness. The night's silence, once filled with sirens and city hum, was now broken only by crickets and the hoot of an owl. Morning air carried the scent of dew, earth, and wildflowers, not pollution. For Noah, the change was a liberation. The boy who lived in a condo with scheduled playdates suddenly had a kingdom to explore. The orchard became his sacred ground. He spent hours climbing low apple branches, building forts from pine cones, and waging epic battles against armies of ants. Edward, true to his word, kept to himself in the guest house, but was a comforting constant. He became the grandfather Noah never had, teaching him to identify bird calls, distinguish a blackberry bush from a blueberry, and wait patiently for harvest time. Their afternoons often ended on the porch steps, Edward sharing tales of his youth, while Noah listened rapt in a way he never had with any screen. Grace watched these moments with a heart full of gratitude. This man, who entered her life by chance, was filling a void in her son she hadn't known existed. For herself, adapting required a different rhythm. The constant adrenaline of the operating room gave way to a calm that felt unsettling at first. She needed work, not just for money, but to preserve her identity. With her stellar resume, securing a job at the local health clinic, a modest building central to the community, was straightforward. Switching from high-stakes cardiovascular surgery to general practice was a lesson in humility and rediscovery. Instead of open-heart procedures, she now treated scraped knees, persistent coughs, and high blood pressure in elderly farmers who brought her homemade jam at every visit. At first, she felt underutilized, her hands itching for the precision of surgery. But slowly she saw a different kind of medicine, one of closeness, listening, and ongoing care. She wasn't Dr. Thompson, a distant authority anymore. She was Dr. Grace, the doctor who knew her patients' dogs' names and asked about their vegetable gardens. Mornings became her healing ritual. Before Noah woke, she'd sit on the porch with a mug of coffee, watching the fog lift from the mountains, revealing the landscape. In those quiet moments she let herself feel. The pain of betrayal lingered, a smoldering ember, but it no longer consumed her. The humiliation, anger, and sadness came in waves, but they were like tides now, not a tsunami drowning her. The natural world was a balm. Tending the garden, feeling dirt under her nails, watching a seed she planted sprout, it gave her a sense of control and hope that Seattle's corporate world never had. She was literally growing a new life. One afternoon, returning from the clinic, she found Noah and Edward laughing loudly in the yard. They'd built a kite from sticks and tissue paper, trying to get it airborne. The wind wasn't cooperating, and the kite nosedived with each attempt, fueling their laughter. Noah ran through the grass, his face flushed with effort and joy, a far cry from the pale, shy boy who left Seattle. Watching them, Grace felt a piercing clarity. Charles's betrayal had been a deep wound, an amputation of part of her story. But what she was building here wasn't a bandage, it was a new limb, strong and vibrant. Happiness, she realized, wasn't the absence of pain but the presence of moments like this. Her son's laughter echoing through the valley, an unlikely friendship with a man nearing his end, the smell of rain-soaked earth. The life she'd left was one of appearances, of external achievements. This life was one of essence, of small, profound joys. Months passed, and Grace, Noah, and Edward became an unlikely family, bound not by blood, but by care and affection. The pain of Charles's betrayal had scarred over, a mark that would always be there but no longer hurt to touch. Noah spoke to his father occasionally. Charles had moved in with Emily, but his life seemed to be unraveling. Grace felt at peace, unaware that life was about to open a new chapter she hadn't sought but would find her anyway. It happened on a Saturday morning at the local farmers' market, a weekly event that had become a favorite for Grace and Noah. The market buzzed with life, scents of fresh sourdough, goat cheese, and herbs mingling with the hum of lively chatter. While Noah marveled at a stall selling honeycomb, Grace browsed a table of handmade pottery. Turning with a small clay pitcher in her hands, she bumped into someone. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, steadying the pitcher. A firm hand caught her elbow, stabilizing her. "No worries. My fault, I wasn't watching where I was going." Grace looked up into a pair of hazel eyes, almost the color of the honey Noah admired, watching her with concern and a hint of amusement. The man was tall, with dark hair tousled by the breeze, and an easy smile that felt genuine. He wore a simple linen shirt and worn jeans, a carpenter's pencil tucked behind his ear like an extension of himself. "Your pitcher's safe," he said, his smile widening. "Thanks to you." "Thank you," Grace replied, feeling her cheeks flush, a reaction that caught her off guard. "I'm Daniel Carter," he introduced himself, extending a hand. His grip was warm and steady. "Grace Thompson." "Thompson? You're not from around here, are you?" he asked, his curiosity friendly. "Is it that obvious?" She laughed. "Just a bit," he teased. "I know most folks around here. You're the new owner of Edward's cabin, right? The doctor." Small-town gossip traveled faster than the mountain winds. "That's me, how do you know? I'm an architect, I'm a sucker for old buildings, and Edward's place is a gem around here. I was glad to hear someone who cares about it moved in." His voice held genuine passion when he spoke of the cabin, a spark in his eyes Grace found captivating. Noah approached, clutching a small jar of honey. "Mom, can we get this?" Daniel crouched to Noah's level. "Hey, champ, I see you've got a good eye for honey." Noah, still wary of strangers, glanced at Daniel, then at his mom, and relaxed. "It's wildflower honey." "The best kind," Daniel agreed. Their conversation flowed effortlessly. Daniel shared that he specialized in restoring old homes, using traditional techniques to preserve their history. Grace felt an instant connection to his purpose. He didn't want to tear down the old to build a new. He wanted to honor the past, give it a future. It was exactly what she was trying to do with her life. "You know," Daniel said as they strolled through the market, "I've always wanted to take a closer look at that porch. The beams look original. If you ever need help with repairs or just an opinion, let me know. I'd love to lend a hand, no strings attached." The offer was casual, but to Grace it felt like an invitation. The cabin, as much as she loved it, needed work. A leaky faucet in the kitchen, a window that wouldn't close properly. "I'd love that, Daniel. I've got a list of little things that could use an expert's touch." Daniel's first visit to the cabin came the next week. He arrived in a pickup truck, a toolbox in the bed, and a homemade apple pie in hand. "My grandma insists you don't show up empty-handed," he explained with a shy smile. As he fixed the faucet, patiently explaining the issue, Grace found herself watching him. The way his strong, careful hands handled tools with precision and care. The way he talked about the wood, the structure, the breath of the house as if it were alive. He wasn't just a technician, he was a craftsman, an artist. Noah was instantly taken with him. Daniel let him help, handing him screws, explaining each step, treating him like an apprentice, not a bothersome child. By the end of the afternoon, the faucet was fixed, and the three sat on the porch, eating Grandma's pie as the sun dipped below the mountains. Daniel's visits became regular. He'd show up with an excuse, checking the roof, sanding a sticky door. But soon excuses weren't needed. He helped Noah with geometry homework, using the porch beams to explain angles. He brought herb seedlings for Grace's garden or a rare book on medicinal plants from a used bookstore. He slipped into their routine so seamlessly that Grace barely noticed when she began anticipating his visits, her heart lifting at the sound of his truck on the dirt road. Their conversations on the porch stretched into the night, covering everything and nothing, dreams, pasts, worldviews. Grace shared her life in Seattle, the pressure of her career, skirting the pain of betrayal but revealing the emptiness that led her here. One evening, after Daniel helped build a bookshelf for Noah's room, they stood in the kitchen, washing coffee mugs. The light was soft, the only sound the running water. "You seem happy here, Grace," he said quietly. "I am," she replied honestly. "More than I thought possible." He stopped drying a plate and turned to her. The intensity in his eyes made her heart race. "You deserve to be happy." The space between them shrank, charged with silent electricity. Daniel raised his hand as if to touch her face, but hesitated, his fingers hovering before he pulled back, a sad smile flickering. "It's getting late. I should go." Grace stood frozen, her heart pounding unevenly. That unspoken moment, that interrupted gesture, spoke louder than words. Something was growing in the fertile soil of her new life. For the first time in ages, she felt the hope not just of a fresh start, but of love. As spring bloomed, bringing bursts of color to the orchard and the garden, Grace and Daniel tended together. A shadow of worry crept over the cabin. Edward, always a steady presence, grew frailer. His cough, once occasional, became frequent and harsh, a dry rasp disrupting the night's peace. He tired quickly, and his morning walks with Noah grew shorter. Grace, with her trained eye, noticed the signs. A faint pallor beneath his sun-weathered skin, the way he paused mid-sentence to catch his breath, the appetite he hid with light-hearted excuses. She respected his wish to live out his days peacefully, without hospitals or aggressive treatments, but her medical instincts wouldn't stay quiet. One night, her concern turned to alarm. Bringing a bowl of hot soup to Edward's guest house, she found him slumped in his armchair, racked by a cough so violent his whole body shook. His eyes watered as he struggled for air. "Edward!" she exclaimed, rushing to his side. She set the soup down and placed a hand on his back, feeling the strain in his lungs. "Breathe deeply, slowly. In through your nose, out through your mouth." She guided him with the calm of countless respiratory crises. Gradually the cough eased, leaving him exhausted and gasping. "It's happening more often," he admitted, his voice a hoarse whisper. "I think the end's closer than I thought, dear." "Don't say that," Grace said, her tone soft but firm. "Edward, you told me you have advanced cancer. I've never pried, but as your doctor and friend I need to ask, can I see your medical records?" He hesitated, pride and resignation warring on his tired face. "What's the point, Grace? Nothing to be done. The doctor in town was clear. It's in my lungs, spread too far. I don't want my last days in a hospital." "I promise I won't push you into anything you don't want," she insisted, her eyes pleading. "But let me look, for my peace of mind." With a heavy sigh, he nodded to a cardboard folder on an old dresser. "It's all in there, what's left of it." Grace took the folder back to the main house. With Noah asleep, she sat at the kitchen table under the lamplight, opening the file of Edward's medical history. The yellowed pages held blood test results, old chest x-rays, and clinical notes. She studied each document with a detective's precision. The blood tests showed elevated inflammatory markers consistent with chronic illness. The x-rays revealed clear signs of bronchial inflammation and scarring. Everything pointed to a serious lung condition. But something critical was missing. She flipped through the folder again and again. No biopsy report. Not a single pathologist's note confirming cancer cells. The advanced cancer diagnosis seemed based solely on imaging and symptoms, an assumption too hasty and, by Grace's standards, dangerously incomplete. Our surgeon wouldn't operate on a heart without a detailed echocardiogram. An oncologist wouldn't diagnose terminal cancer without a biopsy's proof. A tiny, improbable seed of doubt sprouted. What if the town doctor, perhaps overworked or under-resourced, had made a mistake? What if Edward was living under a death sentence that wasn't his? The possibility was staggering, but the absence of that biopsy report was a silent scream she couldn't ignore. The next day she acted discreetly. She scanned the key records and sent them securely to an old colleague, Dr. Patel, one of Atlanta's top pulmonologists, whose expertise was legendary. In her email, she outlined the case concisely, withholding her hopes, asking only for a second opinion. The next 48 hours were agonizing. Watching Edward, seeing him quietly bid farewell to life, tightened her throat. Hope was a double-edged sword. It could bring salvation or make reality crueler. Daniel, sensing her distress, tried to distract her, but even his comforting presence couldn't calm the storm within. Dr. Patel's reply came on a rainy afternoon. Grace opened the email with trembling hands. She read the first line, and her heart stopped. She read it again, tears welling and spilling down her cheeks. "Grace," the email read, "the imaging is consistent with severe chronic bronchitis, likely worsened by years of dust or smoke exposure. The inflammatory markers support this. There's no conclusive evidence of malignancy in these records. Without a biopsy, a cancer diagnosis is, in my view, reckless and likely wrong. With proper treatment, bronchodilators, corticosteroids, this man's quality of life could improve significantly. He's not dying, Grace, he's just not being treated properly." The words blurred before her eyes. Not cancer, bronchitis. A chronic, serious, but treatable condition. Edward didn't have to die. Phone in hand, she ran to the guest house, rain soaking her hair, tears mixing with the cold drops. She found Edward on his porch, watching the rain, just as he loved to do. "Edward," she said, her voice thick with emotion, fighting back sobs. He turned, worry creasing his face at her state. "Grace? What's wrong? Is it Noah?" "No. It's you," she managed, stepping closer. She knelt before him, grasping his weathered hands. "Edward, listen to me. You don't have cancer." He stared, confused. "What are you talking about, dear? Of course I do." "No, you don't," she said, louder, joy and relief spilling over. "You have severe bronchitis, a lung inflammation. It's serious but treatable. I sent your records to one of the best specialists in the country. He confirmed it. It's not a death sentence, Edward. We can treat it. You can get better. You can live." Edward sat in silence, his gaze lost in the rain. He blinked once, twice, as if processing a foreign language. A single tear rolled down his cheek, disappearing into his wrinkles, not of sorrow but of profound, almost painful relief. "Live," he whispered, the word foreign on his lips. In that moment, the man who'd prepared for years to die was told he'd have to learn to live again. And Grace, the doctor who came to the mountains for her own healing, had given her friend the greatest gift: a future. Under Grace's care, coordinating with the Atlanta specialist, Edward transformed remarkably. His cough lessened, his breathing eased, and color returned to his face week by week. He set aside his cane and resumed orchard walks, not to say goodbye but to plan future harvests. The joy of living, long stored away, shone in his eyes again. The cabin brimmed with happiness. For Grace, life had found its axis. She'd built a sanctuary, a refuge from past storms. But storms, she'd soon learn, don't always respect the walls we build. The past arrived as a crisp envelope, delivered by a courier who got lost twice on the dirt road before finding the cabin. The sender was a Seattle law firm. The subject, a divorce settlement proposal from Charles. Grace's heart froze. In recent months, she'd focused so much on building a future that she'd barely thought about dismantling the past. The divorce was a looming formality, a ghost she'd avoided. Now it was here, in her hands, on expensive paper with impersonal text. Sitting on the porch with Daniel at her side, offering silent support, she opened the envelope. The document was dense with legal jargon, but its core was clear and shocking. Charles was being unbelievably generous. He'd relinquished the Seattle condo entirely to Grace. More stunningly, he offered her 70% of the shares in his investment firm, CT Capital, the pride of his life. In return, he asked only for an amicable, swift, and quiet process. Daniel whistled. 70%? Grace, that's a fortune. It's like he's trying to buy your forgiveness. But Grace knew Charles. Generosity wasn't in his vocabulary. Regret, maybe, but giving up control of his firm. Impossible. The man she'd known would fight tooth and nail for every penny. This wasn't a peace offering. It was a move. She just didn't know what. "No," she said, her instincts screaming louder than logic. "This doesn't add up. Charles loves that company more than he ever loved me or anyone else. He wouldn't give it up like this. Something's off." The same distrust that led her to question Edward's diagnosis lit a red alert in her mind. She was no longer the naive wife who trusted appearances. The mountains had taught her to look beneath the surface, to seek out roots and rot. "I need a lawyer," she decided. "Not a Seattle shark. Someone local, someone who understands people, not just laws." Edward, overhearing about the envelope, suggested a name. Mr. Howard, a lawyer from the nearby town. "He's old and cranky, but honest as a summer day and knows the tricks of big city hustlers," Edward said. "He kept me from falling for a developer's scam on this cabin." The next day, Grace sat in Mr. Howard's modest office, smelling of old paper and strong coffee. The lawyer, as Edward described, was in his 70s, glasses perched on his nose, with a gaze that seemed to see through walls. He read Charles's proposal silently, his thin lips twitching occasionally. Finishing, he removed his glasses, cleaned them slowly with a handkerchief, and fixed his eyes on Grace. "Ma'am," he began, his voice deep, "your ex-husband is either very clever or thinks you're very foolish." "What do you mean?" Grace asked, her heart tightening. "I mean, this proposal isn't a gift. It's a trap, a ticking time bomb he's trying to hand you." Mr. Howard leaned forward, his expression grave. "I have contacts, old friends in finance. I spent the morning making discreet calls about CT Capital. Your husband's company, Dr. Grace, is bankrupt. Worse, it's drowning in debt." The revelation hit like a stone. "He made high-risk investments that tanked," Mr. Howard continued. "Took out massive loans using the company as collateral. There are lawsuits, creditors knocking. The company's worthless. It's a liability, a massive debt. The shares he's generously offering aren't an asset. They're a burden. If you sign this, once the divorce is finalized, 70% of that colossal debt becomes yours. He walks away clean, declares personal bankruptcy, while you, as majority shareholder, get stuck with the mess. He's not compensating you. He's trying to ruin you." Grace's breath caught. The plan's cruelty was almost incomprehensible. Charles didn't just want to be rid of her. He wanted to destroy her, to ensure she was buried in debt for life, paying for his mistakes. The bedroom betrayal was an act of passion and selfishness. This was different, cold, calculated, inhumane. It was an attempt to murder her future. A chill ran down her spine. She recalled Charles's panicked look that night. It wasn't just fear of being caught. It was the fear of a man whose empire was crumbling, seeing her as the perfect scapegoat. She stood, anger replacing shock. A cold, precise fury, like the one she felt the night of the betrayal, now amplified by months of healing and confidence. He'd underestimated her, thinking the woman who fled to the mountains was weak, broken, desperate. He had no idea who she'd become. "Mr. Howard," she said, her voice like steel, "what are we going to do about this?" The old lawyer smiled for the first time, a thin, cunning grin. "Now you're speaking my language, Doctor. We won't just reject this offer, we'll fight back. We'll show your ex-husband what happens when you try to con a Blue Ridge woman." Grace left the office not as a victim, but as a warrior. This wasn't just about a divorce anymore. It was about her dignity, her future, and protecting the sanctuary she'd built. Charles had reignited a war she thought was over, but this time she wasn't alone, and she wouldn't back down. Guided by Mr. Howard's sharp strategy, Grace dove into dismantling Charles's trap. The cabin, once a haven of peace, became a makeshift war room. The kitchen table, once for pies and coffee, was now covered in papers, spreadsheets, and bank statements. Mr. Howard, with his network of contacts, was the general, plotting the course. Grace was his field soldier. Using her prior knowledge of the company and access to old documents, she unraveled loose threads. She spent sleepless nights, eyes burning at the computer, cross-referencing data, hunting inconsistencies, piecing together Charles's financial ruin. Each discovery revealed more deceit, hidden loans, doctored balance sheets, borderline illegal tax maneuvers. She wasn't just defending herself, she was investigating. In this storm, Daniel became her rock. He didn't grasp corporate law or financial markets, but he understood structures. He saw Grace's emotional framework under attack. He didn't offer case advice, but ensured her life didn't collapse. He showed up unannounced with dinner when she forgot to eat, took Noah for ice cream or to his workshop for small carpentry projects, creating a bubble of normalcy for the boy, shielding him from the tension. While Grace pored over documents, Daniel fixed a fence, trimmed a tree, or read quietly on the porch, his presence a steady reminder she wasn't alone. One night, exhausted, Grace slumped at the kitchen table, head in her hands. "I don't know if I can do this, Daniel. It's so much filth, so many lies. The more I dig, the deeper the hole gets." Daniel came behind her, his hands kneading the tension from her shoulders. His touch was firm, warm, transferring strength. "You can do this," he said, his voice low and certain. "You're the strongest woman I know, Grace. You faced betrayal, rebuilt your life, made a home for Noah, gave Edward a second chance. You're the town's favorite doctor. This," he gestured to the papers, "is just another rotten structure you need to expose before tearing it down, and you're not doing it alone." She leaned back, her head resting against his chest, closing her eyes to find solace in his heartbeat, the scent of wood and earth he carried. But comfort mingled with something more, an electric awareness of his closeness. She turned in her chair to face him, their faces inches apart. Gratitude in her eyes mixed with an unspoken question, a desire she barely admitted. "I wouldn't have made it this far without you," she whispered. "I'd be here even if none of this was happening," he replied, his voice husky, eyes on her lips. The world seemed to pause. Charles's shadow, the weight of documents, all faded. There was only them, bathed in the kitchen's soft light, the night's quiet. Daniel leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a timid kiss. It was months of pent-up feelings, admiration, desire, a deep need for connection. Grace's hands climbed his chest, clutching his shirt as if he were her only anchor in a sea of uncertainty. They parted, breathless, their hearts beating as one. His gaze was a flame, burning away any doubt. Without a word, Daniel took her hand and led her from the kitchen, leaving the war of papers behind. He guided her through the quiet hallway to her bedroom door. There he paused, his thumb brushing her cheek, the touch sending warmth through her. "Grace," he began, offering a final chance to step back. She silenced him, placing her fingers on his lips, then pulling him into the room. In that gesture, she wasn't just inviting him to her bed. She was inviting him into her life, her heart. In the bedroom's dimness, lit only by moonlight through the window, they gave themselves to each other. It was a fierce tenderness, a dance of bodies and souls longing to connect. Each touch healed, each kiss promised. That night, in Daniel's arms, Grace wasn't the betrayed wife or the warrior in battle. She was a woman loved, fully and unconditionally. For the first time in forever, she felt truly home. Trips to Seattle for mediation hearings were a plunge into a past Grace preferred to forget. Each visit tested her newfound peace. But she wasn't alone. Daniel insisted on coming, his silent presence a shield against the city's hostility. He didn't enter the hearing rooms, but his waiting at a cafe across the street was a beacon. Each confrontation with Charles, a man now consumed by his own ruin, his impotent anger a pitiful display, drew strength from Daniel's support. With Mr. Howard at her side, Grace dismantled Charles's lies with surgical precision, watching the color drain from her ex-husband's face. The legal battle dragged on for months, a test of nerves and intimidation. At each hearing, Charles's empire crumbled under the weight of his deceit. The final judgment day arrived. With Daniel by her side, a silent armor, Grace faced her past one last time. The verdict was a mercy blow. Divorce granted, Charles's fraud exposed, and she was free. Seeing the impotent rage on her ex-husband's face, Grace felt no joy, only the deep relief of closing a door forever. Freed, she felt an urge to create, to transform. With the condo sales proceeds, she and Daniel dove into renovating the cabin and building rental cottages for visitors seeking retreat. The project wasn't just about walls and roofs, it was about building a future brick by brick. Their shared labor and daily partnership wove a bond stronger than words. The cabin, under Daniel's hands and Grace's careful eye, was reborn. On a rainy afternoon, weeks later, they sat on the porch reviewing plans for the guest cottages. The rain pattered on the roof, a now familiar comfort. Daniel pulled her close, interrupting talk of blueprints. "You know what I think of when it rains like this," he whispered, his face near hers. "Our first kiss." She smiled. "The relief," he corrected, his voice serious. "All the tension, the fear you carried, washing away with the water. I want this rain to take the rest." He kissed her again, not a kiss of discovery but of celebration. Deep, passionate under the curtain of rain, with nothing left to hide, no battles to fight, just the certainty of being home in each other. They laughed, soaked and joyful, the strain of months dissolving into pure, liberating happiness. Life settled into a serene, joyful rhythm. News from Seattle came sporadically. Charles, buried in debt and ruined reputation, was left by Emily, who wanted no part of his failure. He called Noah on weekends, but the gap between their worlds was stark. One night, tucking Noah into bed, he surprised her. "Mom, Dad asked if I miss my old school. My friends there." "What did you tell him, sweetheart?" Grace asked, stroking his hair. "I said no," Noah replied, his sincerity piercing her heart. "At my old school, kids teased me for not being good at soccer and liking books. I was alone. Here, I have Grandpa Edward teaching me about the stars, Daniel showing me how to build stuff, and friends who like running in the woods with me. I'm happy here, Mom, really." In that confession, Grace found final validation. Her triumph wasn't just hers, it was Noah's too. She hadn't just shielded him from a toxic divorce, she'd guided him to a place where he could be himself. Days turned to seasons. The cabin, renovation complete, glowed with new life. Edward, health stable and spirit renewed, was the patriarch of their unconventional family, the keeper of stories, and the grandfather fate gave them. Daniel and Grace, partners in life and love, saw their dreams take shape, step by step. On a golden afternoon, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the four sat on the porch. Noah dozed in Edward's lap, and Grace nestled in Daniel's arms, gazing at the landscape. "Look at this," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "A year ago, I thought my life was over. I thought all I had left was pain." Daniel tightened his embrace. "And now?" She turned to him, her eyes shining with happy tears. "Now I know that wasn't an end. It was a beginning. The betrayal, the pain, it was the storm that pushed me off the wrong path and brought me here, to you, to this life." She stood, pulling him to the grass where the first stars began to twinkle. Under the vast Blue Ridge sky, she kissed him, a kiss filled with gratitude for every step of the journey. Grace finally understood. The discovery that turned her life upside down wasn't the betrayal in a luxury condo. It was realizing true happiness lay not in a successful career or a life of appearances, but in the simplicity of a sunset, a child's laughter, the touch of true love, and the peace of a home built on truth, resilience, and hope. She hadn't just survived, she'd been reborn. In that mountain haven, she found far more than she'd lost. She found herself. If you were moved by this story of overcoming hardship and finding love, don't forget to leave a like to help us bring more stories like this to other people. And we want to know, what city are you watching from? Comment below, we'd love to see how far our story has traveled. Oh, and subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single chapter of our next great stories. A big hug, and see you next time.